students, welcome to Tarunayas. Today we will be discussing editorials from The Hindu and Indian Express, and I have taken references from other newspaper and other sites as well, which I will be mentioning while discussing from 3rd of October 2022. So the first important editorial that we are going to discuss is about opening the Center of Studies for Bay of Bengal by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and why it is important and what is the relevance for India's Indo-Pacific strategy and also the international relationships when it comes to India and its global ventures. So this is the news. India launched a Center for Bay of Bengal Studies at Nalanda University. You can relate this topic with General Studies Paper 1, Important Geophysical Phenomena. Why you can relate it with this? Because of the Bay of Bengal. Bay of Bengal, you know that the occurrence of tsunami and cyclone is frequent, and tropical cyclones. So this is the static part that you have to cover. All right, from geophysical phenomena, so tropical cyclones and tsunami, you will be covering. General Studies Paper 2, International Relations, India and its Neighborhood. Why this topic is related with this? Because of three things that I would particularly like to mention. First is the BIMSTEC. Second is Quad. Third is East Act policy. Right. So these are the three important. This is the East Act policy of India, and these two organizations. Quad is not a formal organization, you have to keep in mind. However, BIMSTEC is a formal organization, so you will have to try to link this center with these three important policy and organization that India is related with. Right? You can relate this topic with General Studies Paper 3. With role of external state, non-state actors in creating challenges to internal security. I would be relating this topic with maritime security of India. With maritime security of India. What are the laws that governs the maritime security? What are the different armed forces that covers maritime security? And what are other scenarios that affects or challenges the internal security of India? And second point that I would be covering in this discussion is the blue economy. The blue economy. All right. So this, you can relate it with this as well. The fourth thing that I have not mentioned here, but however you can relate it with that topic as well, is the management of border. Management of border. Specifically the maritime borders. What are the challenges that India faces while surveilling the maritime borders, while maintaining the peace and security at borders, and how maritime border security is different from the land security. We will discuss this in brief as well. So I have taken this editorial from The Hindu. This was the base. I have expanded it by taking references from India Brand Equity Foundation and IDSA, which is Institute of Defence Studies Analysis. Manohar Parrikar Institute of Defence Studies Analysis, established in Goa. So these are the two websites from which I have taken references for maritime zone security and for blue economy, and this was the base article that I referred to. Like I have written that I have taken input from IDSA and IBEF, India Brand Equity Foundation. So let's move on to our article. right? So you see that why Center for Bay of Bengal Studies is important, because it is in coherent with the India's maritime vision. The first, that how you're going to link it with your static portion is, the first point is the India's strategy, which is called as Sagar, right? The second point is Sagar Mala project. So these are the two things, and changes in law that recently Parliament has made, changes in laws that governs the maritime zone of India. The Port Act, right? Admiralty Act, right? So let's move on to, so this center would align the efforts of National Maritime Security Coordination that was recommended by a group of ministers in the year 2000, right? I will also discuss that what are the different components and what are the different levels in which the maritime security is governed. And the center is also in orientation and realignment of major power towards Indo-Pacific. Now, why I have written it here is, you can relate it with, the first is USA's Indo-Pacific strategy. USA's Indo-Pacific strategy. The second is the European Union Indo-Pacific orientation. Right? And third point is countering China. Right? The fourth point is establishing harmonious relations with ASEAN nation. All right. Let's move on to what are the different possibilities that the center would offer is geoeconomics. If you look at the position of Bay of Bengal, if we look at the position of Bay of Bengal, I will only draw half of the map here. If you see the position of Bay of Bengal, this is Bay of Bengal. Most of the ports of India are located here, right? India also has two major initiatives connecting India with ASEAN nation. This is, first is the trilateral highway, and the second is the Kaladan port, connecting it to Sitwe, right? So these two are the major initiatives that links India with ASEAN nations, right? So we have geoeconomics and geopolitics. Then we have ecology. Why ecology is important? First point is the plastic generation. According to, this is the data which I have taken from Center for Pollution Board. Central Pollution Board. The first is the plastic generation. Center for Pollution Control Board. According to this 3.6 lakh tons of plastic is generated by India annually, and only 50 out of this 3.6 lakh tons of plastic, only 50% goes into recycling. Now this is the official data, goes into recycling. We will also discuss the other efforts by the government with respect to the plastic generation and how India is trying to control the plastic generation. Second point is the dead zone. Right. This was a paper which was published in a journal, international journal called Nature, and according to this 60,000 square kilometer of dead zone was discovered in Bay of Bengal. Bay of Bengal. 60,000 kilometer square of dead zone. So that is the reason why the Center for Bay of Bengal Studies becomes important. The third point is, let me clear this. The third point is the operational discharge. You see that near Hooghly there are many industries located, and there is a constant flux of polluted water, point source pollution and non-point source pollution. These two are the major factors when it comes to discharge of nitrogen compound, which is responsible for creating the dead zone in Bay of Bengal. Right? So we have covered these three. Trade and commerce. According to Ministry of Commerce, 77% by value and 95%, 77% by value and 95% by volume. This is India's shipping, India's trade via shipping. Right? Blue economy. We will discuss blue economy in detail. Connectivity. How it is important for connectivity? First is the ASEAN nation. Second is the Malacca Strait. Right? Third is the Quad and bilateral exercises. Right? So that's how connectivity and maritime security becomes important. The laws. India's official stance is the open and free sea lanes plus rule based order. The cultural heritage, connection with Sumatra, the historical connection with Sumatra, Java, Cambodia. So we have to preserve the cultural heritage also. And not just restricted to this, when it comes to trade and commerce, there is one more point that I would point towards, is the jute industry. In India, majorly the jute industry is located in Bay of Bengal, near Bay of Bengal, and Bihar, Jharkhand. So you relate it with your economic geography as well. Related with economic geography as well. So this was the possibilities that can be explored when it comes to Center for Bengal Studies. Now, what is the importance of Bay of Bengal when it comes to India? We discussed it already, the geopolitical, geo-economical and physiographic importance. The blue economy, the environmental challenges, the climate change, sea level rise, sea level rise, right? Frequency of increasing frequency of cyclones. According to one of the World Bank data, India loses approximately 8% of GDP when it comes to damages caused by natural hazards, displacement of people. There was one report which was published by UNESCO that 5 million of children are displaced due to environmental hazards or due to environmental reasons. This affects their other fundamental rights. So you can try to relate the topic in this multidimensional way. The expansionist policy of China, that is the string of pearl. The expansionist policy of China, the string of pearl, you can try to relate it with this way. The cultural engagement I have already discussed. Now, what are the challenges that are associated with the Bay of Bengal? The population growth. The population density near Bay is increasing, right? The first reason is the industries, of course. Bengal is a hub of industry. The second reason is the humanitarian crisis. In Myanmar. So, of course, this leads us to an important issue called the Rohingya refugee crisis. Bangladesh has of course tried to settle them to this Char island, which is an to this island. But yes, population growth is there, migration is there, which increases the burden on natural resources. Creation of dead zone also challenges, or you can say that it also impacts the livelihood of fishermen, right? So the population growth is putting pressure or burden on resources in Bay of Bengal. The altered land use for the purpose of industries, for the purpose of industries, deforestation, etc. The other geophysical phenomena like El Nino and La Nino, which affects the Indian monsoon and the climatic conditions near Bay of Bengal, that also poses challenge. So Center for Bengal Studies is going to help India to tackle all these challenges. The sea level rise, the climate change, the operational discharge by the industries, the salinization and incursion of saline water, and incursion of saline water. Now, what happens because of this? What happens because of this is, first is the land degradation. First is land degradation. According to State of Environment Report, 2019, India has approximately 30% of its land under degradation, and salinization or incursion of sea water results into this. The second point will be the change in agriculture pattern. Because of the land degradation, there will be change in agriculture pattern, which will also impact the utilization of resources and the economy near Bay of Bengal. The sea level rise we have already discussed. The climate change we have already discussed, and the operational discharge also in the form of point and non-point sources we have discussed. Excessive resource exploitation when it comes to fishing, when it comes to jute industry. The utilization, jute industry demands fresh water for the rattoning of jute. So jute industry, the fishing, so excessive resource exploitation. Center for Bengal Studies is going to help in policy formulation in order to optimize the utilization of resources near Bay of Bengal for sustainable development, for sustainable growth and development. Right. Now, since we are talking about Bay of Bengal, so we will also talk about the maritime security. I am trying to relate it with the economy and security as well. So we will discuss maritime security now. So after 2008 terror attack, the Indian government and parliament, they overhauled the whole security mechanism. This was post 2008 attack. The security mechanism, it was completely overhauled. According to IDSA, there are two important armed forces which are responsible for the maritime security of India. The first is the Indian Coast Guard. Indian Coast Guard was established in 1978 by the Indian Coast Guard Act of 1978 following the two major events. The first one is the passage of the maritime. The first event was passing of the Maritime Zoning Security Act 1976. Maritime Zoning Act 1976, and second was the Convention by UNCLOS. Right. So these were the two important events that happened, and by the recommendation of K. Rustamji committee, Indian Coast Guard was established for policing purpose. For policing purpose, right? The second organization that is responsible for security of maritime security of India is Indian Navy. In fact, Indian Navy is the majorly responsible for the whole maritime zone of India, not just the international water or the exclusive economic zone, but the complete maritime zone of India. Indian Navy, right? BSF is also responsible, but BSF is deployed near in Bay of Bengal, in eastern side, and the Gulf of Kutch. The Gulf of Kutch near Sir Creek. This is actually in continuation with the land border, and also India's policy of one border, one force, one border, one force. However, there is no one force. Of course, there are the Indian forces. They are divided into different parts. There are paramilitary forces. There are Indian armed forces. But the concept is one border, one force. The reason being that the maritime security, that the maritime zone is divided into different states. From Gujarat to West Bengal. Right? So what are the laws that governs India's maritime security? First is the respective Arms Act, Armed Forces Act, the Indian Navy Act, Indian Coast Guard Act, the second is the Admiralty Laws, 2017. So these two are the major laws that governs the maritime security of India. Now, the Indian maritime zone or the maritime zone of any country is divided into parts like this. So this would be the international airspace. This one will be international airspace. Okay. So there is internal waters. Now, what is this internal waters? Suppose this is the coastline, right? Suppose this is the coastline and there are islands like this. So the water here will be internal water. The water that incurs towards the land side. So this will be the internal water, right? And so this is land from the coastline, or this is the baseline. According to the Maritime Zoning Act, this would be the baseline. We will discuss that why there are two different terminologies like baseline and coastline, and what kind of ambiguity it causes, and what is the challenge that it causes when it comes to the maritime security. So this is the baseline. From baseline to 12 nautical miles, it will be territorial waters, right? And from territorial water onwards to 200, let me change the color of the pen. So from territorial water onwards to 200 nautical miles will be exclusive economic zone of India. And from territorial water to 12 nautical miles will be the contiguous zone. Here, this comes under Indian Coast Guard. This area for policing, surveillance and security purpose, this comes under Indian Coast Guard. This part comes under maritime police. This part comes under the maritime police of respective states. or coastal police. This part is the maritime police or coastal police, right? And this area until exclusive economic zone and also to the high seas is Indian Navy. Is Indian Navy, right? So this is how the maritime security is governed in India. Some part is dedicated to Indian Coast Guard, some part is dedicated to Indian Navy. In fact, Indian Navy is majorly responsible for security of all of these zones. However, the Indian Coast Guard and Indian Navy and maritime police and coastal policing, the division like this causes certain ambiguity also. We will discuss what challenges India faces when it comes to maritime security. So, like I already discussed, the current security structure is Indian Navy, majorly responsible. The Indian Coast Guard is responsible for internal waters and territorial waters and up to certain extent of the Indian contiguous zone. The coastal marine police of the respective states, the BSF when it comes to Gulf of Kutch, Salt Creek and Bay of Bengal, the land and coastal border falls within the purview of Ministry of Home Affairs. However, these two organizations are under Ministry of Defense, right? So you can see that this will cause the ambiguity when it comes to maritime security. So this is the first challenge, the organizational or the structural challenge, that Ministry of Home Affairs is responsible for land and coastal border security. However, the two major organizations that are responsible for surveillance falls under the Ministry of Defense. So the challenge is that of the coordination. So the challenge is that of the coordination. So let's discuss what are other challenges. As I discussed, the land and coastal border falls within the purview of Ministry of Home Affairs. However, the ICGs, that is Indian Coast Guard and Indian Navy, they are under the purview of Ministry of Defense. That too, they are under the different departments. The offshore security post discovery of oil near Bombay High. Post discovery of oil near Bombay High, the offshore security is also under the purview of Indian Navy. There is another challenge to the maritime security of India is the lack of parameter for measuring the efficacy of maritime security, right? Now there is one important challenge that India faces is the ambiguity of baseline and coastal line. Now this baseline is taken as a straight line, right? For example, this is the land. This is the land here, right? According to maritime zoning, this baseline will be taken as the straight line. However, this coastal line will be this line. This coastal line will be this, right? So effectively what happens, especially in the area near Gulf of Kutch, approximately 200 kilometer, the area from the coastal line to the baseline, some 200 kilometers of the area, according to IDSA, it remains unsurveilled. This area is effectively, it remains out of the security. So this is the problem that maritime security faces. However, there are certain initiatives that the government of India has taken when it comes to maritime security. We will try to divide the initiatives into two parts: the international initiatives that how India is participating on international platforms, and what are the different international organization or platform that India itself has launched. And first part is the national initiatives. So under national initiatives, there are some of the initiatives which are specifically taken by ICG, that is Indian Coast Guard, like Standard of Operating Procedures, Operation Sajag was taken, the Community Interaction Program, Search and Seizure and Rescue, etc., etc. The Indian government is basically trying to upgrade the defense capabilities. Of Indian Navy as well as the Indian Coast Guard by providing offshore patrol vessels, laser dazzers, for example lasers. These are basically used to stun a person for some time after giving several warnings. So the Indian government is trying to upgrade the defense capabilities of Indian Coast Guard and Indian Navy. That is the national initiative. The Indian government is also trying to reform laws. So it has reformed port laws. Second, the third point, it already reformed the Admiralty law, which was passed during the colonial rule, which was passed by the British colonial rulers. However, in 2017, this was changed in accordance with India's vision. And now let's talk about what India is doing at international platforms. International platforms, right? The first is the bilateral exercises. Example, PASEX, the passage exercise. SITMAX, aside. India, Thailand, Singapore. SITMAX, maritime exercise. So these bilateral maritime exercises by India, this is initiative at international level. The second one is after bilateral exercises, India has also tried to engage with different countries. For example, Quad is there. For example, East Asia Summit. Right. For example, the defense summit of ASEAN. Participation in the defense summit of ASEAN nation. Right. Now what else Indian government is doing in reference with the Center for Bay of Bengal Studies is the ban on plastics. To effectively reduce the plastic pollution, and thereby reducing the marine plastics. Right. The second is the CDRI. The third is the International Solar Alliance. Right. The fourth is the initiative when it comes to hybrid energy. The fifth is the solar floating plant. Solar plants, but floating. In Visakhapatnam. All right. So this was about the maritime security of India and what are the other initiatives that India has taken. what are the other initiatives that India has taken. And now we will move on to the blue economy, which is also important when it comes to Center for Bay of Bengal Studies. What is this blue economy? It's basically the utilization of the marine resources in sustainable way, so as to not only improve the livelihood, to have a sustained economic growth, but also preserve and conserve the oceanic ecosystem within the country's jurisdiction. This is the definition by World Bank, the sustainable use of oceanic resources, basically. Now, according to IBEF, which is India Brand Equity Foundation, the blue economy in India, it contributes to 4% of GDP. How? India's fisheries sector, we are the second largest exporter of the fisheries products, right? And according to IBEF, India had estimatedly exported approximately $7.2 billion of export when it comes to the blue economy from April 2021 to February 2022. The exploitation of the polymetallic nodules. Now, what are these polymetallic nodules? Basically, they look like, this potato kind of a structure that contains some heavy metals that are currently in demand due to increasing pace of industrialization due to increasing reliance on the renewable energy like e-vehicles, etc. So the increasing reliance on renewable energy and the increasing pace of industrialization, there is a rising demand for the heavy metals. So polymetallic nodules. India in 1987 by ISA, by international seabed authority was given a certain area in mid-oceanic basin of Indian Ocean to exploit polymetallic nodules. Approximately 4 million miles square has been explored, right? Exclusive rights were granted by ISA, which is International Seabed Authority. International Seabed Authority, headquartered is in Jamaica, Kingston. It is headquartered in Jamaica. What are the components of blue economy? Is the renewable energy. What are the different energy resources that can be constituted under renewable energy? Is the tidal energy, the geothermal energy, right, and the thermal potential energy. Now, what is this? This energy exploits the difference in the temperature between two different levels, between two different sea levels. So this thermal energy, geothermal energy, tidal energy, etc. Tourism, promotion of tourism, fisheries, or you can write like livelihood. All right. So the maritime security is also important in order to protect our fishermen. Right? So maritime security, you can relate it with the blue economy. You can relate it with how the Center for Bay of Bengal Studies is important when it comes to different and other initiatives by the government of India. The climate change affects blue economy, and CBS going to help us study the nature of the climate change, how it is going to impact India and its economy, and what will be the different ways in which India can tackle and face all these challenges and effectively manages not only security but also the economy. Waste management, right? Waste management. We discussed about plastic. You can try and link it with the solid waste management as well. Then you can link it with Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. right? Not when it comes to the hinterland or when it comes to the border state, but to the states which are, but to the coastal states, right? Coastal states, ODF plus, etc. plus. The maritime transport. First, let's talk about the sea lanes. So we have got commercial shipping. Then we have tourism, and we have passenger shipping as well. Passengers, right? So maritime transport is there. Blue economy is also important because of India's engagement with let me delete all this. India and its engagement with Indian Ocean Commission. There are different this organization is constituted by countries called as the vanilla countries, like Comoros Islands, Seychelles, and Assumption Island, and all these islands, these vanilla countries. So India's engagement with IOC, right? Maritime transport and maritime security. India's engagement with IOC. India's engagement with Sri Lanka, right? So these are the two, you can say, India's major engagement which effectively contributes to maritime transport and as well as maritime security. Then fisheries I have already talked about. So let's move on. The importance of blue economy we have discussed. The shipbuilding and the shipping industry. We also have a scraping industry, the ship scraping industry, right? The coastline, protection, conservation and security. You can also relate it with the coastal security zones, right? Zone 1, Zone 2, Zone 3, A, B, and Zone 4, right? So according to IBEF, coastal shipping, it has the potential to increase to 33% by 2035. So that is the reason why. So these are, whatever that I have discussed so far, they actually talk about that how the establishment for Center for Bay of Bengal Studies will help India in facing these challenges. Basically, in resolving these issues in policy formulation, India's commitment, and what commitment does India have? Divided into three parts, right? The first commitment is the 5S commitment at UNSC reforms, right? Here this the second is the free sea lanes, free, open and rule based order, right? And the first is the environmental commitments that India has. 2022 26th Glasgow Summit. Whatever the 5 commitments that Prime Minister Modi had made there. So I have divided India's commitment into 3 parts. So you can also try and link this topic this way. Right, so India's own commitment. So this is how this establishment for Center for Bay of Bengal Studies becomes important, right? What are the different initiatives that India has? The first is the National Policy for India's Blue Economy. As per the policy document, now what are the different components that India's blue economy will have? Increase the blue economy contribution, lives of the coastal residents needs to be improved, protect the maritime biodiversity. For example, I discussed about the dead zones in Bay of Bengal. Dead zones. So what India did for this? Gulf of Mannar was declared as the national park, right? And contribute to the national security. So these are the different components of blue economy according to the policy document by Ministry of Earth and Sciences. Framework, let me take the pen. Framework for robust mechanism, data collection. Data collection is important because it helps us understand different things that are needed for the policy formulation. The sustainable framework for national coastal marine, that is the spatial planning, coastal economic zones, CEZ, the marine tourism, the blue flag beaches, almost 10 beaches have been given the blue flag certification, the plastic elimination according to the 2016 rules, and they were amended in 2022, new rules were brought. National marine litter policy, that we have to reduce the marine litter, and national coastal mission. Any mission, it will have general ideas like reducing the population density, conserving the resources near the coastal area, etc., etc. Framework to domestic manufacturing, emerging industries, trade, tourism, technology, services and skills development, which are all connected with the blue economy, right? Domestic manufacturing, for example, fisheries. So we will have to develop the food processing industry. We will have to develop the cold storages. That means blue economy has to be linked with other policy of India's, just like, for example, the national logistic policy. What does it say? It says that India has to reduce national logistic cost by 5% by 2025. That means reduce it from 14% to 9%, right? So this is the aim of Indian government. So you can relate it with the national logistic policy. Then you relate it with the Sagarmala initiative. Port-led port development, right? Sagarmala initiative. Then blue economy has to be linked with the Sagar initiative that India has, right? So this is how you link it, right? I have written it here also. The multimodal network, which was announced in the budget 2022. In the budget 2022, the tax regime harmonization, the overhauling of the whole process of the port shipping, reducing the turnover, reducing the number of days, required for port clearance. So India has reduced it to 2.5 days, right? We have to reduce it to further, right? So tax regime harmonization is there. Digital grid we have to establish, logistics we have to improve, multimodal networks should be there. Oceanic governance. Governance will include everything that I have discussed so far. The National Blue Economy Council will also be established. The coordination, communication and clarity. This is the aim for according to the policy document. After covering Center for Bay of Bengal Studies topic, we will move on to one static topic that I have taken from General Studies paper 3, and that is inclusive growth and the issues arising from it. I will try to cover this topic holistically here. So what is the definition of what do we mean by inclusive growth? What do we mean by inclusive growth? You can read the definition of inclusive growth and development by OECD, but I will explain it, that any growth which include every section of society, and the benefits of that growth and the benefit of that economic growth is distributed fairly across all these sections, whether they are in monetary terms or in the non-monetary terms, but they are distributed fairly across all sections of society. So every section of society is included and the benefits are distributed to all of these sections, right? So this is what is meant by inclusive growth. Now, what is India's approach when it comes to inclusive growth? The Sarvodaya model that was given by Gandhiji, and the in 11th 5-year plan had for the first time emphasized on inclusive growth. However, it was in the 12th 5-year plan that India had specifically mentioned that we need faster, inclusive and a sustainable growth. What do we mean by this sustainable growth? Sustainable growth means the pace of the growth, however, may be slow, but it should be sustained. It should be sustained so as to create enough opportunities. For all. Right? It should not be a jobless growth. When does the jobless growth arises? We will discuss that as well. Right. Now, what are the different elements of inclusive growth? I will divide the elements into different parts like social, economic, right, and the good governance. The social, economic and governance. For any country to grow and prosperous, the governance is very important. If there is a mismanagement when it comes to governing the country, rest of the initiatives, all other initiatives that are taken by the government will be fruitless. So when it comes to inclusive growth, first I have taken from social. So when we speak of inclusive growth, you try to move from General Studies paper 1 to General Studies paper 2 and to General Studies paper 3 and General Studies paper 4. You will be taking out topics from here. So in General Studies paper 1 and 2, we do have some social aspect. So first is the social empowerment. So social empowerment of all the stakeholders, be it women, children. So that means we have to effectively reduce the child labor. According to census 2011, there are approximately 10 million child workers, child labor, right? Of course, they would have increased in ages since 2011. However, the new data of census 2021 is yet to come, so we will rely on the data given by census 2011. So social empowerment of all the stakeholders, women, which constitute approximately 48% of the population, children, the older person approximately 8.6%, the person with physical disabilities maybe 2.5% or something according to census 2011, right? So we will quote, unless the census data of 2021 is in public domain, we will quote this data only. So social empowerment of course, male also, men, women, both. Social empowerment of all the underprivileged section of the societies as well. Poverty elevation. Now this poverty is related with economy as well and with social as well. Poverty is never just economic, it is socio-economic aspect. Poverty is governed by the socio-economic aspect. So therefore, according to census 2011, there is approximately 21.9% of the people who are below poverty line. However, due to COVID-19, it has been estimated, it was that a large population it fell below poverty line. So this data might have changed. However, we will still rely on the data given by the census, So poverty elevation is the element of inclusive growth, that when we decrease the poverty, everyone is included in the growth and development of the nation. Access to essential services like health and education and the governing institution. One by one we will look at this. Health, what does health does? It increases the longevity of a person, and it also enhances the productivity of a person. So health contributes to the productivity of the nation. And when the nation is productive, it is skilled. So access to essential services is important, because health reduces what? DALY. What is DALY? Is the disability adjusted life years. Access to education. Education has one important function, that education is the secondary socialization. What do I mean by this? The secondary socialization. Let's explain it in detail. So I was talking about social empowerment. Right? Social empowerment. And in that social empowerment, I was covering health topic. And this poverty. Now what are the reason for poverty? This is women. Women. Poverty causes, what does poverty causes? It causes couple, not just women, but the couple, to increase the family size. So there will be more number of children. That means higher TFR, right? We will discuss that how poverty induces population and how population induces poverty, and what are its effect on the women. So social empowerment, what are its effect on the health and education and skill development. So poverty causes the couple to produce more children, that means increases TFR, and effectively reducing, first, their access to education, second, skill development, So if these two factors, which helps a person or a human to develop its capabilities, to develop its socio-economic and political capabilities, is reduced, right? Therefore, all those children who were born to a couple stricken by poverty, their human capabilities will be effectively reduced, and hence a cycle of poverty, which is also known as, which is generally called as this vicious cycle of poverty, continues, right? How to break this cycle, we will talk about this, that how Indian government contribution or initiatives will break this cycle. So we were discussing about the health, right? So health is that important parameter or that contributes to the inclusive growth. Because a healthy population and a healthy mind will be effectively contributing to the skill, capability of a person and economic growth. Right? So this is it. Education. The third point was this: poverty we have discussed, health we discussed, and education. Now what does education does? It provides skills, it provides knowledge, it enhances the capability of a person to learn, to innovate, right? To innovate. What is the education budget of India? What is the education budget of India? What is the health budget of India? You have to see this. And what is India's target when it comes to education and health? What is India's budget when it comes to R&D, which is important not just for the health intervention but also for the education purpose? The R&D budget is approximately 0.6% of the education budget. 0.6% of the education budget, right? So we have discussed, so far we discussed social empowerment, the empowerment of women, right? How the women will be empowered, So you look at your syllabus this way, that General Studies paper 3 says the employment. So employment of women, reducing the employment of children but increasing the employment of women. According to Center for Monitoring of Indian Economy, during the 2 years of lockdown due to COVID-19, the women participation in India was 9%, and now even if we take the data from World Bank, it has increased to just 25%, considering that women constitutes approximately 48% of the population. Therefore, it is very low. This is the global average, and this is India's participation, and it has increased to some 20% only. So participation, so employment, health, education. So all these are contributed in social empowerment. Participation in political institutions. Participation in political institutions, participation in judiciary, right? All this contributes to social empowerment. Poverty elevation we have discussed. Access to essential services we have discussed. Now comes the economy. Sectors of economy. Agriculture. First, let's discuss agriculture. Now, according to agriculture census, right? Agriculture contribution to GDP since independence, it is reducing. It is only reducing. However, the population that depends on agriculture has not reduced very much. There is no significant reduction in the population dependent upon agriculture. However, there is a significant reduction in its contribution however, there is a significant reduction when it comes to contribution of agriculture to GDP, right? So approximately 48% population is dependent upon agriculture. Out of that, 30% are female laborers, right? Female laborers. There are certain other facts that you have to keep in mind. Is the operational land holding. Operational land holding, which is 1.04 hectare. which is 1.04 hectare. That means approximately 80% of the farmers are small and marginal. This causes the productivity of the land to reduce, right? And there are other problems also that are associated with agriculture. We will discuss it in detail when we will take agriculture as a separate topic, but right now, since we are discussing inclusive growth, so we will try to include as many dimensions as possible. So economy, we will discuss the sectors of economy. So agriculture, I have talked about, the industrial and manufacturing. Now this manufacturing sector is important. If in any nation manufacturing sector is not developed, that means there is no secondary sector that will absorb the labor from the agriculture sector. So if certain number of people or a significant number of people decides to leave agriculture, they will not be absorbed into manufacturing, because the tertiary sector, which constitutes the service sector, requires higher skills and higher qualification, right? So therefore, for any nation which has demography, whose demography is that it has large number of youth and higher number of working population or labor, so it has to develop its secondary sector, that is manufacturing sector, in order to skill this generation, this working population, and absorb it into manufacturing. Therefore, inclusive growth, one of the component of inclusive growth will also be the manufacturing sector when it comes to the economy, when it comes to economic inclusion. The second aspect is the financial inclusion, right? I have taken this data from Ministry of Finance, Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, because that is the nodal ministry, that as on January 2022, there were approximately 44.33 crores of beneficiaries. Out of those beneficiaries, 24.66 crores were female beneficiaries. What does it mean? That the females, that the economic participation of female is increasing, right? And employment generation. According to Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, India's unemployment rate was 8.3%. Right? This is the unemployment rate, and we have to reduce it. And India's labor force participation is 40%, which has declined in fact from 47% in 2016. COVID-19 is also one of the major reasons why India is facing unemployment, and there are other reasons as well, that because India is facing what is called as jobless growth. Why we call it as jobless growth? Because of the ineffective development in the manufacturing sector, the higher contribution by the service sector, And another important thing is the capital intensive industries that India. From the second plan onwards, India focused on this capital intensive industries rather than the labor intensive industries. If I take example of Bangladesh and Vietnam, you can refer these two examples from Economic Survey 2017-18. So in Economic Survey of 2017-18, if I remember it correctly, Bangladesh and Vietnam example was given, that how the labor was absorbed into leather, footwear and cloth apparel industry. Now these are all labor intensive industries. So India needs to develop these industry in order to absorb the labor, so as to reduce the employment rate and increase the labor force participation, right? So employment generation is that one component which will contribute to the inclusive growth. All right. Now, good governance. According to second ARC, for any country to govern itself, it should follow three paths, which is ethos, pathos and legos. Now, this was given by Aristotle. Now, what is ethos, pathos and legos? See, ethos means the ethical, the moral part, right? The legos are the law, right? And this pathos is actually related with the person, that is the personal trait. So we have to, for any country to govern itself, the officials in the governing institution should have these qualities or traits which contributes to good governance, right? So according to second ARC, if any institution has monopoly over something, but it is not accountable to anybody, so monopoly plus unaccountability always leads to corruption. And corruption, what does the corruption does? It reduces the economic productivity. It reduces the effectiveness. It reduces the effectiveness of the welfare initiatives, right? Therefore leading to what? Inequality. Now this inequality can be economic inequality. According to inequality report that was published in the year 2022, 10% of the top population holds 57% of the wealth. This is how high the inequality in India is. Another inequality is the social inequality. So according to the global gender gap, India ranks 135th out of 146th countries when it comes to global gender gap. That means the gap between the opportunities given to a male, whether it is political, social or economic opportunities that are given to a male for self-development and enhancing its capabilities, are more when it compares to female, right? So global gender gap. So gender gap, because of corruption, this is also the reason. If inclusive growth is not there, inequality, it results into inequality, right? If a nation does not follow an inclusive path of growth, it also results into hunger, malnutrition. According to global hunger report, or global hunger index more specifically, India ranks 101st out of 116 countries. Like, this is what India's ranking is, right? Malnutrition. What are the different components of malnutrition, and how it impacts the productivity of a human? There are two important parameters to see the malnutrition, because malnutrition is just not a health problem, or it's just not a problem when it comes to the food habits of a person. However, the malnutrition is also related with the condition of the mother. So according to National Family Health Survey, 50% of the female who are between the age group of 15 years to 49 years, they are anemic, and this anemic female give birth to a child who will be suffering from malnutrition. So child stunting in India, and child wasting, right? These are the two important things that you have noticed. Approximately 35%. Now this data I have taken from sample survey, right? SSR, this data, sample survey data. 35% of the children are stunted, right? Why there is a need for inclusive growth? To elevate the poverty, that I discussed with you in detail, to reduce the regional disparities, to enhance the nutritional level, right? the global nutrition aim, ठीक है, right, to reduce the gender disparity, to enhance the agriculture productivity, to reduce informalization, to effectively reduce the unemployment, and there are certain constitutional obligation on the government, and also last one, to achieve sustainable development goal by 2030, sustainable development goal by 2030. Now let's discuss in brief what are the different aspects or approaches for inclusive growth. India followed trickle down approach since independence, right? What does this trickle down approach means? That Indian government will have fund, and they will be given to the different levels of the government, and finally they will reach to the Indian citizens. Now this was the trickle down approach, which was highly ineffective. Then came the bottom up approach. In 1992, we know that India passed the Constitutional Amendment Act, which formed the third tier of governance, the Panchayati Raj institutions and the urban local bodies. So from grassroots level, the initiatives at the grassroots level will help country grow. This was the bottom up approach. And then India also follows the welfare policy, because India is a socialistic democratic nation, so therefore it follows the welfare approach also. That means it is a basic needs approach, fulfilling the basic needs of people. For example, the National Food Security Act. 75% of the rural population is covered under this act, right? The Antyodaya Ann Yojana, Mahila Sashактикаран Pariyojana, these are all welfare approach. The Manrega Act of 2025, increasing the employment, right? However, Amartya Sen, he gave one approach called capability approach. Now in this approach, he spoke of that a capability of a person, rather than giving welfare as a dole to a person, the capability of a person needs to be enhanced. The capability of a person needs to be enhanced so that he or she is capable, so that an individual or a person is capable of improving its skills, enhancing its productivity, etc. on its own, and contributing to the growth of the nation. So this was the capability approach. Niti Aayog also recognized the inclusive public spaces, sustainable growth will employment generation. Now this employment generation is very important. Otherwise we will see what is known as the jobless growth, right? Microfinancing and cooperatives, these are the ground level initiatives, like self-help groups are there, NABARD self-help group linkage. These are the ways by which we can have inclusive growth, cooperatives, microfinancing, right? This is how the nation can achieve inclusive growth, right? So with this, we are done for today. Thank you so much.